Suspended 3 meters above the chaos of Lysara's Grand Market, a gravitational silence bubble shimmered against the flashing neon signs and smog-drenched light. Within it, Kalen Vire hovered in a lotus position, inverted against the pull of planetary mass, his dark hair fanned upward like smoke in vacuum. Around him, the world below screamed in sound, color, and entropy, an overwhelming assault of scent and motion, where desperate merchants hawked synthetic delicacies and black market tech, where the smell of frying hydroprotein clung to the air like oil on steel. Inside the bubble, silence reigned. Each breath Kalen took stretched outward like a ripple through space-time, controlled, deliberate. His gravitational field expanded, with his exhale compressing the air into stillness. Around his left arm, Raven, the sentient AI wrapped in living filaments, pulsed with passive bioluminescence. Its consciousness remained dormant, a coil of restrained power. Nothing moved within Kalen's reach without permission. The world might be burning, but within his cocoon, gravity obeyed. Then came the fracture. The market trembled. Not in noise, but in rhythm. A shift. A scream was cut short. A burst of kinetic displacement whipped through the sensory field like a blade through fabric. Something fast, green, and pulsing with light hurled itself across the crowd. Kalen's eyes snapped open, catching the trajectory too graceful to be luck, too chaotic to be trained. The figure moved with inhuman precision, bounding between vendor stalls, each leap tinged with desperation and pain. Her skin gleamed like living jade, alive with internal light. She clutched a crystalline object against her chest, one that pulsed golden with rhythmic urgency, a Solon shard. A shard of stellar power capable of controlling star-forging energy collectors forbidden in almost every quadrant. Behind her, a swarm of Exovanta drones pursued in synchronized formation, red targeting dots painting terror across every innocent bystander in their path. They moved with industrial detachment, their kill protocols already active. Kalen adjusted his field, instantly collapsing the silence bubble with a thought. His limbs dropped like a dead weight for half a second, then reoriented. Gravity bent around him. He didn't fall. He launched. The burst of momentum carved through the smog, and his spine snapped into controlled torque as Raven deployed. Its liquid fibers stretched from his shoulder blades into magnetic lines, latching onto market infrastructure with a crack of force. Kalen inverted his field mid-swing, slicing a perfect arc through air and sound toward the fugitive's projected path. In the split second before impact, her eyes locked with his bright turquoise fractured with silver, ancient and impossible. Recognition flared in both directions. In that moment, nothing else existed but memory. A refugee camp, the metallic tang of stolen sweet meat turning bitter, and a small jade-skinned girl placing half into his palm without a word. Contact. Their bodies collided mid-air. She twisted reflex sharp but not fast enough to avoid him. His arms closed around her waist. Together they tumbled into the narrow alley between two collapsed stalls. Kalen rolled with the landing, absorbing impact into muscle and mass field. Dust clouded the air. Light from the Solon shard cast warped silhouettes across the wall, her back pressed against his chest. He felt the heat radiating from her skin, the faint static in her breath, the scent of ozone, and something floral complex. Between them, the Solon shard pulsed brighter, responding not to movement but to contact. Its glow intensified. Its energy fed on the proximity between two bodies suddenly caught in shared orbit. For several heartbeats, they didn't move. The air seemed to hold its breath. Her muscles were taut not in fear but readiness. His grip remained firm, not aggressive, just secure. Their breathing synced without effort. She turned slowly within his arms. Her face was centimeters from his. Up close, her eyes looked like galaxies held captive in crystal, the flecks of silver shimmering like collapsing stars. Her lips tinted the same luminous jade as her skin parted slightly in the quiet. Kalen's heart stumbled once in his chest, an old echoing memory reawakened. Then came the whine of machinery. Overhead, the drones regrouped their shadows, passing over the mouth of the alley like vultures made of steel. The Solon shard flared again, danger recognized. Raven activated a soft perimeter scan. Data scrolled silently along Kalen's left retina, tactical disadvantage exposure, hostiles advancing. The system whispered the bounty code. 50 million. Dead or alive. Preferably alive for interrogation. Kalen didn't hesitate. He shifted his field again, Redirecting momentum sideways, pulling the woman Sarilith, his mind now named her deeper into shadow. Her body moved with his instinctively. No resistance, no delay. As if a rhythm long dormant had begun again. The alleyway tightened, but Kalen's body had memorized tight corners, and his companion adjusted her breathing with soldier's training. Their skin remained in contact, more than necessary, more than tactical. It grounded something ancient between them. Above them, one drone hesitated near the entrance. A brief scan swept the wall, missed the signature by milliseconds, then moved on. Raven adjusted field density to mask heartbeats. The Solon Shard responded with complete stillness. The air became weighted with unspoken tension, and still they remained chest to chest, alive in defiance. When the danger passed, Kalen pulled back just slightly enough to breathe, not enough to break connection. Sarilith did not recoil. There was no need for words. The moment had already passed between them. Not just memory, but certainty. This woman was royalty, fugitive weapon, and mystery. And yet, she had once shared fruit with a starving boy in the ruins of Mirathane. That single act long ago now echoed across space and time. Kalen's decision wasn't logical. It wasn't tactical. It was gravitational. He would not let them take her. And the Solon Shard, glowing like a newborn sun, agreed. They moved together like twin streaks of tension and momentum, threading through the veins of a city that pulsed with ancient technology and corporate hunger. The understructure of Lysara was a maze of collapsed corridors and reappropriated tunnels, forgotten maintenance shafts now overtaken by black market wiring, fungal lighting, and the scent of ozone soaked into stone. Every step forward carried weight. Every turn was a gamble between survival and annihilation. Kalen led, but Sarilith kept pace. Her body betrayed the precision of elite training, every motion controlled, calculated, efficient. And yet beneath the armor of discipline, her pain radiated in micro-hesitations and shifted breath. Something in her side wasn't functioning properly, though she gave it no voice. Her skin glowed dimmer under strain. Her footfalls grew uneven. Still, she followed him into darkness without question. A shattered transit line became their path, twisted steel and glass underfoot, the remnants of a forgotten maglev. As they advanced, Kalen recalibrated his gravitational field to distribute weight across damaged supports. Behind him, Sarilith adapted silently, her balance impeccable even under duress. The air was thick with magnetic interference. Far above, faint tremors suggested drones rerouting their search. They were not safe. They were never safe. Raven adjusted field mapping in real time. It pulsed low-priority alerts against Kalen's wrist proximity. Echoes increased patrol zones, tactical bottlenecks. The AI's calculations suggested no clean exit. Every way forward was a wound waiting to reopen. When they paused beneath a collapsed archway laced with glowing mycelial threads, Kalen turned, motioned for her to stop, and crouched. Without instructions, Sarilith approached and leaned forward, offering her weight. He lifted her effortlessly onto his back, her body folding against his in quiet agreement. There was no sound, no protest. Only the sudden nearness of warmth, of breath on skin of arms, tightening around shoulders of legs, wrapping across his sides with perfect control. The contact burned, not with fire but with resonance. Raven's fields adjusted again, recalibrating for merged biosignatures. The Solon Shard pressed between their bodies, pulsed in time with two heartbeats now overlapping. Its glow flickered like breath held too long. It recognized something beyond escape. Kalen launched them forward. The corridor narrowed. He bent physics around them with each bound defying weight, skipping across fractured girders, redirecting momentum through the soles of his boots. Her body moved with his as if rehearsed. No excess motion, no wasted energy. And yet every jolt drove pressure into the space between them. Not pressure of flesh, but of proximity, of unspoken memory. As they passed through a collapsed maintenance hatch, Kalen landed hard and let her down slowly. Her breath stuttered once, but she said nothing. She stood tall, eyes scanning forward, hands still brushing his back as if reluctant to sever contact. Around them, the tunnel's glow began to dim. Energy patterns destabilized. Power reserves here had long since begun to rot. They walked forward in silence. The only sound came from the soft thud of boots on old synth stone and the fading heartbeat of lights that didn't want to be awake anymore. Somewhere above them, Lysara's neon screamed into the void, oblivious to what moved beneath. Their path bent sharply into a service corridor lined with abandoned bioterminals. The walls pulsed once with low-frequency data echoes, as if whispering forgotten secrets. Sarilith ran her fingers across one panel. It responded, briefly, almost shyly. Her presence was recognized, logged, then forgotten again, as if even the infrastructure wasn't sure she still belonged. Kalen felt the shift before he saw it. The texture of the ground changed, the temperature dropped. Residual energy began pooling beneath their feet in erratic swells. They had entered an old transit intersection, one used before the collapse, before corporate grids had overwritten the planet's pulse. The air here tasted like static. Then came the vibrations, barely perceptible at first, then rhythmic, metallic, approaching. He calculated trajectory tilt reflection. They were being cornered, a pincer formation standard drone protocol when herding high-value targets into dead zones. There would be no negotiation, no paralysis beam. These units were meant for cleanup. Kalen scanned quickly. One breach in the wall caught his eye, a narrow shaft barely wide enough for two bodies to slide through without armor. He motioned once. Sarilith didn't question. She slipped in beside him, her body brushing his with every constriction in the tunnel. Their limbs tangled as the shaft grew tighter. Heat spread through the confined space, not from motion, but from nearness. The drone footsteps passed just outside. Kalen muted his own pulse. Sarilith's breath stirred the space beside his cheek. Her skin radiated light in low waves, her back pressed to cold alloy. His chest nearly fused to her side. Raven dimmed its interface to black. The Solon shard again matched its rhythm to theirs, choosing stillness over panic. For 1 full minute, nothing moved. Not metal, not flesh, not time. When it was safe, they crawled through and emerged into a forgotten chamber laced with moss glass and rusted alloys. It smelled of abandoned engineering and filtered starlight. Sarilith straightened slowly. Kalen rose beside her. They didn't speak, but something shifted between them, an unspoken confirmation. They were no longer strangers crossing paths in disaster. They were momentum. As they pressed onward, Raven alerted again. A reading in the distance, foreign massive stable, a power source, an anomaly, pre-collapse unregistered. The readings were unstable, but not hostile. Kalen scanned the walls. Patterns emerged beneath the grime, Lysari markings, ceremonial etchings buried under years of decay. Sarilith ran her hand across them. They responded not with function but memory. She had walked these corridors once as a child, perhaps before war and exile had written over the map of her life. The corridor opened suddenly into a chamber unlike the rest. A dome of carved crystal and ancient biolight hidden deep beneath the market's pulse. At its center, a platform floated above a pool of radiant fluid. The architecture pulsed with unspent energy. The Solon shard responded violently, its glow intensifying, throwing bands of gold across the chamber. Panels illuminated. Mechanisms stirred awake. Raven's scans turned incoherent. This place recognized them. It didn't ask for identity, it asked for connection. The chamber's interface activated, requesting dual biosignatures. Not sequential, simultaneous. The implication was clear. Healing could not occur without unity. It demanded convergence. Gravitational, biological, emotional. They stepped forward. Not as fugitives, not as soldiers, but as two pieces of something ancient and unfinished. The platform accepted their weight, and then the light took them. The light was not light. It was memory. It was heat without flame, touch without skin, gravity without mass. It wrapped around Kalen and Sarilith like a second atmosphere, sealing them into the chamber's luminous core. The platform beneath their feet pulsed in response to their presence, synchronizing not to their names, ranks, or species, but to the shape of their shared resonance. The Solon shard hovered above the pool of radiant liquid, like a sentinel returned to its cradle. Its crystalline surface flared with golden pulses that sent ripples through the chamber's walls, lighting up long-dormant glyphs and waves of recognition. The architecture reconfigured plates, shifted energy nodes, blossomed like petals. And at the chamber's heart, a cocoon of glass and bioluminescent roots unfolded with solemn grace. It was not a prison, it was not a machine, it was a choice. The chamber did not ask them if they wanted to merge. It told them they already had. The Solon shard emitted a deep harmonic thrum as the healing process initiated. Raven's input dimmed into silence, its systems overwhelmed by the resonance field saturating every molecule in the air. Kalen felt the moment the bond began, not as pain, but as memory flooding in reverse. His earliest thoughts re-emerged, not just as images, but as smells, sensations, muscle memories of moments he had not lived alone. A child with emerald skin pressing half a fruit into his palm, a burst of laughter beneath broken solar panels, a dream of starlight that was never his. Sarilith's memories poured into him like river water breaking a dam, not as words, but as emotional frequencies. Longing exile, bone-deep loneliness wrapped in ceremonial duty. He saw her as a child watching her sisters train with light blades while she wandered empty halls. He felt her wonder the first time she escaped into the lower city. He tasted her bitterness when her gift was deemed too wild, too radiant to control. The fusion was cellular. The fluid surrounding the platform rose in temperature, climbing past tolerances. It did not burn. It refined. It stripped away the genetic silos that defined them, reshaped the scaffolding of DNA, like calligraphy in progress. Their respiratory rhythms aligned, heart rates stabilized, neural activity locked into mirrored pulses. Gravity bent slightly inward toward the chamber as if the planet itself was listening. The interface accepted their joined signature. The biopod closed around them in soft, radiant bands. Not separate chambers, one. Their bodies aligned by design and chance. Her breath warmed his neck. His mass field wrapped around her skin like a magnetic field embracing charged particles. They were suspended in a cradle of elemental potential, and neither resisted. There was no time for a protest. The fusion moved faster than language. Hormonal exchanges triggered cascade reactions across muscle groups and endocrine pathways. Mitochondrial shifts blended human resilience with Lysari adaptability. Blood chemistry adjusted. Neural links formed. A third heartbeat fluttered once between them. Not theirs, not yet real, but a signal of possibility so profound that the chamber itself paused, as if stunned by its own creation. The Solon Shard's pulse accelerated. Around the pod, ancient runes shifted color, acknowledging the convergence. Systems linked that had not spoken to one another in centuries. Outside the chamber walls, the city above remained unaware. But beneath Lysara's crust, something older than monarchy or machines whispered in approval. The transformation was not sexual, it was sacred. Cells remembered what it meant to belong. Kalen's awareness expanded outward, spiraling through his companion's mind. He touched the edge of her fear, not of him, but of herself, of what she might become if she ever stopped holding back. He didn't push. He wrapped it in, calm offered her anchor. She responded with a burst of luminous emotion that made his heart flutter and his lungs forget how to draw air. She accepted him. The cocoon peeled open with the quiet reverence of a temple gate. They emerged together. Their limbs trembled not from weakness, but from recalibration. The gravity field surrounding them warped gently in response to their steps, no longer bound by Kalen alone. Her light trailed behind her in fractal patterns that reacted to his motion. His gravitational ripples shifted based on her breath. They had become symbiotic. The chamber acknowledged completion with a low descending tone. Its walls dimmed, folding back into hibernation. The Solon Shard returned to Kalen's hand, its warmth now pulsing in harmony with the rhythm in Sarilith's chest. Raven reconnected with a stutter of static, its voice hesitant for the first time in years. The AI's data streams attempted to parse what had just occurred, but came back flagged with unknown variables. It no longer read two signatures. It read one composite entity, formed from two. Outside the corridor trembled, not from tectonics, but from approach. Kill signatures bloomed at the edge of Raven's detection grid. Multiple hostiles, military grade. No drones this time. Human, elite, cloaked in anti-scan camo, already moving into position. Sarilith raised her hand, and a ring of soft light fanned out around her, slicing through shadow. Kalen instinctively wrapped their shared mass field around her radius, forming a kinetic shell. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They moved. Out of the chamber, through the collapsing corridors. Upward, together. When the first assassin breached the ceiling panel above them, gravity failed for an instant. Kalen reasserted the field mid-leap. Sarilith twisted beneath him, releasing a spear of focused luminescence that pierced the intruder before he even realized what he'd seen. The body fell like a broken constellation. More followed. A blur of movement, camouflage flickering, weapons charging. Seralith's light curved in strange angles, now bending through Kalen's gravitational distortions. Every beam became a whip, every field a trap. Their bodies moved in synchronized arcs like dancers in a combat ballet choreographed by instinct. She illuminated threats, he redirected fire. She sliced through armor with her bare hands. He collapsed floor panels beneath enemy feet. At one point, Kalen spun midair, catching her waist and using the centripetal force to swing her into a firing position. Her arms locked around his neck. Her legs flared out behind her. The air became a ribbon of light and motion. They were not two people fighting together. They were one force, and the city noticed. Sensors awoke. Power conduits flickered. Biological surveillance relays, long disconnected, began transmitting again, sending footage not just of battle, but of transformation. Of a human and a Lysari fighting in perfect resonance, wielding ancient power like they'd been born for it. The battle ended with silence. 6 bodies crumpled across the corridor. Kalen stood still, chest heaving. Seralith leaned against his back, her light flickering through the hallway like the dying pulse of a comet trail. The Solan shard dimmed. Raven logged the timestamp. The light binding had begun a new war. Above the ancient corridors above the chamber, still humming with the aftershock of light and gravitational fusion. The planet of Lysara stirred restlessly. The pulse of civilization layered in its crystalline veins did not sleep. Far above orbit darkened with growing hostility. The night sky had begun to fill with warships. Exovanta's fleet entered Lysaran orbit with cold precision, phasing out of hyperspace in silent waves. The assault formation was unmistakable twin arcs of blockade cruisers flanking a central flagship whose silhouette resembled a weaponized cathedral. Its hull shimmered with stealth plating, and its exposed spires crackled with electromagnetic charge. It came not with ambassadors or proclamations, but with pre-targeted kill vectors and orbital descent codes already locked onto the capital city. Kalen and Seralith stood beneath it all, unaware for now, but changing everything. The two of them moved through the lower palace districts as shadows realigned. Word had traveled even without tongues, sensor whispers, feedback loops, the subtle shifts in architecture that betrayed ancient systems waking from slumber. The city recognized the convergence. Light binding wasn't a myth anymore. It was manifest. They crossed through bioluminescent archways and fluid structures that realigned themselves in their path. Walls opened, doors retracted. The deeper into the palace they moved, the more their presence shaped the world around them. Not through authority, through resonance. The High Council chamber waited like a throne carved into a mountain of glass and memory. 12 figures stood at attention, draped in fabrics woven from living minerals, each face bearing the stoic weight of lineage. Behind them, starlight refracted through the translucent dome, turning the floor into a swirling sea of color and time. This was not a place of debate. This was a crucible. Kalen stood alone in the center. Seralith watched from the curve of the dais, her sisters now flanking her. They had arrived wordlessly, as if summoned by the same frequency. Elena, the eldest by breath, if not spirit, radiated cold calculation. Kaevra, forged of fire and training, stood unmoving blades holstered but vibrating with tension. The council reviewed data in shimmering light, projected images of the fusion event, the sealed chamber, the combat footage. Kalen's biosigns interwoven with Seralith's. The Solan shard now fully awakened in his possession. A convergence event that had not occurred in 3,000 years. He said nothing. He let the truth speak through aura. The council pressed for questions, for context, for assurance. Their eyes reflected uncertainty, wonder, and barely veiled fear. What they beheld was not just a union of species or of bodies, but the return of a legend, embedded deep in their succession law, the anchor-bearer. The gravitational counterforce to Lysari light meant not to dominate it, but to keep it from collapsing in on itself. Then came the rupture. Sensors in the chamber flared. Harmonic alarms sounded not from within the palace, but from the sky above. A fleet, Exovanta, in formation, charging weapons, not waiting for council approval or negotiation, preparing for enforcement execution of a planetary clause buried deep in galactic corporate contracts. Raven intercepted this broadcast seconds before it would have reached the floor. Kalen accessed it through retinal overlay. The image rendered in perfect clarity Era Hallett, the CEO of Exovanta herself, standing like an artificial deity before a quantum array. Her skin unnaturally smooth, her voice calibrated for persuasion and threat in equal measure. Her accusation was not unexpected. A rogue human had infiltrated the Lysari royal line using primitive biological bonding. A light-binding event triggered without council authority. An ancient succession law exploited to disrupt interstellar energy control. The footage manipulated to suggest coercion, predation, sabotage. Kalen absorbed every word in silence. He didn't look towards Sarilith, he didn't need to. The air around him thickened as gravitational nodes bled from his body. The Solon shard at his hip flared, once quiet but resolute. The dome above them hummed in response. The council wavered, not because they believed Exovanta, but because they feared what came next. The old systems had been designed for ritual, not war. The convergence core had not been activated in millennia. The defense grid linked to the Solon shard had no recent precedent. The laws themselves were outdated, ambiguous, and the man standing before them was neither Lysari nor royal. He was gravity personified, and Sarilith had chosen him. Outside the capital's spires began to dim, power redirected to shield arrays. Evacuation warnings blinked through translucent buildings. Children were pulled from learning domes. Elders stirred from crystal beds. The city felt it, the breath before annihilation. In the chamber, Kalen finally moved. He stepped forward not in arrogance, but in absolute stillness. His voice, when it came, carried no grandeur. It simply existed like orbit, like pull. His presence made words unnecessary. His choice had already been made. And the Solon shard responded. It rose from his side like a comet breaking gravity. Its core unlocked. Beneath, the city system shuddered awake, not from command but recognition. Sarilith's sisters saw it before the council did. The resonance across Kalen's skin matched the temple glyphs. His frequency echoed the ancient patterns embedded in the convergence algorithms. He wasn't just the latest bonded outsider. He was the missing variable, the one who could stabilize them. A Lysari could channel infinite light, but without an anchor, they burned. Together, bonded through ceremony and now cellular exchange, Kalen and Sarilith formed the first true stabilization in recorded history. Then the final signal arrived. Exovanta's fleet had reached critical proximity. 12 minutes to planetary bombardment. Kalen turned not to the council, but to Sarilith. She stood already stepping forward. Her expression unreadable, but her light brighter than ever. Her body pulsed in radiant cadence with his field. Between them, a harmony hummed that neither doctrine nor logic could refute. Together, they moved toward the chamber's rear, where the floor retracted, revealing a spiral stair of light. Beneath the palace, beneath the city, beneath the memory of Lysara, the convergence core waited, buried in crystal and legend. They walked together without hesitation. Behind them, the council whispered. Above them, the enemy bristled. Within them, a world changed. The descent into the convergence core was not a journey through space, but through resonance. The spiral stair of light that unwound beneath the High Council chamber was no simple architectural marvel. It was a living artery of the planet, designed in the age before corporate governance, when energy was sacred and every footstep upon the crystal was a vow of guardianship. Kalen moved first, his gravitational field adjusting with each step, subtly counterbalancing the core's pulsing feedback. Behind him, Sarilith followed her radiance, igniting dormant panels embedded in the walls, each flicker a memory of power once thought lost. Together they descended into the oldest chamber on Lysara, older than the council, older than the palace, older even than the legends. The convergence core awaited them at the base. It was no engine, no control room. It was a cathedral of energy and intention. Suspended in the heart of the planet's crust, the core glowed with the light of 3 captured suns, a pool of raw power held in perfect stasis by gravitational harmonics and photonic anchors. Its walls were composed of living crystal, etched with shifting runes that responded to Kalen's presence, aligning themselves into patterns only visible to those whose signatures matched the original architects. This was what the Solon shard had been forged for, not control, but communion. Sarilith's gaze lingered on the central platform, a suspended ring of luminescent alloy hovering above the convergence field. It was a place for 4. She understood instantly, and without discussion, the configuration. She took her position, placing one hand against a receptor that flared with soft gold. The light recognized her and pulsed in greeting. Kalen joined her, aligning his hand to the opposite receptor. The Solon shard leapt from his belt and settled into a cradle of energy suspended between them. It pulsed once, an accepting heartbeat. Then the chamber began to wake. From the upper corridors, Elenai and Kyevra arrived in synchronized motion, their footsteps light, purposeful. Neither spoke. Their expressions were shaped by a silence forged in childhood and refined through ceremony. They took their places on the remaining pedestals, completing the fourfold alignment. And then the process began. The Solon shard flared brighter than it ever had before. Raven went silent. The core flooded with photonic pressure and gravitational modulation. The field around them warped slightly, time bending along the edges of the room. The energy was not hostile, but it demanded attention. It was not meant to be controlled by individuals, but through unity. Each sister represented a facet of light, warmth, intensity, and balance. Kalen represented gravity, the field that made their energies orbit without collapse. Together, they formed a harmonic quartet capable of initiating the planet's deepest defense protocols. The convergence interface activated, speaking in pulses of light and heat rather than words. Threat detected: orbital bombardment. Recommended response: planetary phase resonance activation. Risk level: critical. The system offered no guarantees. The maneuver they were about to attempt, redirecting the entirety of Lysara's planetary crystal matrix, had not been used since the Siege of Altar, an event so ancient it had slipped into myth. That activation had created a pulse wave powerful enough to drive an invading fleet back into dark space. It had also nearly shattered the planet. Still, they continued. Kalen could feel this buildup through his bones, energy crawling up his spine, wrapping around his ribcage. His gravitational sense expanded, no longer confined to his body, but encompassing the chamber, the matrix, the sisters. Every breath he took shifted the frequency of the room. Every beat of Seralith's heart adjusted the focus of the output. Above them, the first salvo from Exovanta's flagship struck the planetary shields. The impact rippled through the core as a harmonic disturbance. The system held for now. On the surface, the city lights dimmed as energy rerouted. Biocrystal towers diverted power into underground reservoirs. Civilian transports fled the capital, leaving behind contrails of desperate light. Defense platforms, centuries out of commission, groaned as they woke to a planet on the brink. Within the convergence core, the Four stood at the center of it all, woven into the matrix not by command, but by resonance. They became the signal. Kalen's eyes burned with gravitational input as the Solon shard downloaded real-time data into his optic nerves. Every ship in orbit appeared as a gravity well, every weapon a pulse waiting to be redirected. He identified patterns, weaknesses, oscillation frequencies. Elenai, linked to the planetary systems through her lightband neural relay, began the synchronization countdown. Kyevra focused the output into tight harmonic cones targeting specific fleet formations. Seralith, glowing brighter now than he had ever seen her, stabilized the distribution matrix by matching her breath to the pulse of the Solon shard. Kalen gathered their frequencies into his field, and then he released it. The entire chamber erupted. Light streamed upward in spiraling columns carried through the crystal arteries of the planet, channeled into towers, ridges, and mountains, carved not for aesthetics, but for focus. The planetary surface became a lens. Lysara itself transformed into a single massive energy conductor. The pulse reached orbit in under 2 seconds. It did not destroy. It disabled. Every Exovanta ship caught in the path lost power immediately. Their weapon systems shorted. Propulsion failed. Artificial gravity collapsed inward, causing internal damage as decks twisted and folded under their own mass. The flagship's command systems shut down entirely, leaving its CEO staring into a flickering void. The fleet reeled. Kalen stood still at the core of the storm. The resonance had not ended. It had only begun. As the enemy retreated, limping into the void with fractured systems and shattered confidence, the light faded from the convergence core. The energy relays disengaged. The Solon shard dimmed to a quiet content glow. The four figures atop the platform stepped back, breathless eyes reflecting the impossible. They had not only saved a planet, they had changed its destiny. Above the silent convergence core, beyond the palace, where ancient crystals still hummed with spent power, the sky began to clear. The final Exovanta warship blinked out of orbit, its fractured hull disappearing into the vacuum between stars, trailing a scar of failure. The blockade was broken. The threat had passed, but Lysara was no longer the world it had been. In the days that followed, seismic shifts of a different nature unfolded. The High Council ratified the Light-Binding Union, not as an exception to tradition, but as a fulfillment of it. Records long buried beneath legal doctrine resurfaced texts that spoke not of dominion, but of balance. The purpose of the Solon Shard had never been to crown a single ruler. It had been a test of convergence, of shared control, of willingness to trust gravity and light in equal measure. Kalen did not ascend a throne. He refused one. Instead, the governance of Lysara shifted to a new structure, a triad with Serelith and her sisters, presiding equally, their differing temperaments, now harmonized through the resonance they shared with him. Kalen remained an anchor, both literal and symbolic, a stabilizing force that existed outside of policy, but at the center of purpose. Their bond had created a blueprint. Other worlds long caught in the gravitational pull of megacorporate control began to notice, and ask, and hope. Beneath all that diplomacy and doctrine, something else bloomed, quiet, organic, undeniable. Serelith changed. Her laugh became less guarded, her presence less fractured. No longer pressed into royal postures, she moved with the calm of someone no longer hiding her strength. Her proximity to Kalen was constant, not in the possessive sense, but like a star to its orbiting moon. They existed now in shared fields, their bodies recognizing the pull before their minds even registered it. I, the coldest of the three, softened in strange moments, especially around Kalen, whose stability seemed to quiet her perpetual calculations. Kyevra remained sharp. Her fire never dulled, but even she learned to fold into the shared gravity of what they had become. The planet itself seemed to approve. Lysara's spires pulsed brighter at night. Crops grown near crystal veins yielded in abundance. Dormant technologies reactivated not from code, but resonance. It was as if the planet, long starved of balance, had finally remembered what harmony felt like. And then, not long after the convergence, came the true miracle. Serelith's aura began to flicker with frequency, shifts previously undocumented. Her photonic readings pulsed in a dual rhythm. Medical scans failed to render full results. The Solon Shard vibrated when near her skin. Raven ran multiple diagnostics before confirming the impossible. A third signature had begun to form within her. Not a fetus in the biological sense, not yet, but a convergence imprint, the start of a new pattern. A life designed from resonance shaped by gravity and light. A child who would carry not just genes, but frequency. Not just bloodlines, but balance. Lysara's firstborn of both worlds. The chamber where the Solon Shard had once glowed bright now stood quiet, visited rarely. But when it was, the walls still responded to Kalen and Serelith, not in alarm, but in recognition. They had passed the test not by conquest, but by creation. Months passed, then a year. And on the first anniversary of the convergence, the skies bloomed again, but not with warships. Above the palace on the highest spire, once used for planetary calibration, Kalen stood with Serelith beside him. Her hands rested on her stomach, now subtly rounded. Light glowed faintly beneath her skin. Her breath aligned with the pulse of the crystal beneath their feet. Far below, the capital celebrated not a coronation, but a resonance festival. Children painting their hands in bioluminescent dye couples, dancing beneath refracted starlight, elders whispering of old legends made real again. Behind them, Elenai and Kyevra joined without ceremony, the bond between the four, no longer a secret nor a scandal. The people had seen what it meant to be light-bound, and they had chosen to believe. A wind passed over the spire, warm and electric. Kalen breathed deeply. He did not think of war or loss or the fractured pieces of his past that had brought him here. He thought only of this moment, of the impossible calm, of the luminous presence beside him and the pulse within her that would one day rise to shape stars. His hand found Serelith's. The crystal beneath them pulsed once in perfect harmony. The future had already begun. From war-torn ruins and ancient rituals to the convergence of light and gravity, Kalen and Serelith's journey reshaped not just the fate of a world, but the meaning of unity itself. In a galaxy where domination had long been the only language of power, their resonance proved that balance, trust, and love could realign even the oldest laws of nature. And now, with a child born of fusion and peace, a new harmony dawns, not forged by force, but by frequency. If this story sparked your imagination, subscribe for more cinematic, emotionally driven science fiction. Comment below what part of the convergence moved you the most. And if you were bonded by light, who would your anchor be? Until next time, stay luminous and remember the stars are always listening.